All right. So I see the stream coming through. I'm just gonna say a few words myself. Make sure my mic's coming in clean. And then Rob, you can go ahead after me.
Yep. Check, check. Can everybody hear me? Hello.
Hey, how do I sound?
Then you,
Probably
Jeremy.
bad. I don't have a great mic here, but that's all right.
Yeah. So, sounds like we're all coming in pretty good. So, all right. All right. Now I have to close this out because I'm getting that weird thing where you hear, you hear like everyone saying what they just said
Oh, yeah.
5 seconds later, and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
stuck in a time loop. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is unusual for us to have a morning episode, but we did it last minute because we were excited to get our special guest today, Jeremy Kauffman. Jeremy, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I think everyone who's a supporter of LP Mises Caucus should be feeling pretty good this morning. I know there's still some things going on with Karen Ann that aren't good, and we need to fight those. But I think we should feel like things are headed in a very positive direction.
Cool. And then Rob, how are you doing this morning, my fine co-host?
Chipper, man. Sprightly over here.
Cool. Yeah, it's been a week. I mean, it feels like we had like a month of shit happen in 5 or 6 days. I mean, I just every day, and like my wife's gonna be like, "Why are you on your phone all the time?" And I'm just like, I like the shit's going up, like, and we're all I'm sharing like the Ron Paul meme. We're like, it's happening.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's just been crazy. For that, so we should probably do a little bit of like a recap for those who maybe don't haven't, I mean, if they're living under a rock or just don't pay that much attention. But let's try to make sure we can recap everything that's happened this past week. We know Joe Bishop Henchman stepped down from chair, resigned. Um, Karen Han did the vote? I didn't hear. Did the vote for Karen Ann Harlos to be suspended? Did that go through?
I have not seen on the email. I
Yeah,
know
I don't know. I don't know if
nothing happened
everybody's
last
voted
night.
yet. I think it's
But
like open for 7 days, so uh, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, then the LNC did not vote to disaffiliate New Hampshire because of people who are upset by our guest today, mainly,
Yeah.
and actions of others with him. Yeah, Jeremy, let's get a little bit into it, I guess, with all this stuff, and it seems like your actions and comments over the past couple months have been at least part of at the center of what has caused a lot of this these just infights and controversies and things. I mean, like, how does it feel for you to be like kind of like the person that a lot of people are focusing in on and you know, and highlighting?
Yeah, well, I don't want to make this all about myself. So let me actually give some of the context coming into this. And I'm not trying to avoid answering your question because I want to. But I'm just one member of the communications committee. I did send some of the tweets from the LPNH account that got some people upset. But even there, we need to talk about which ones, because people are upset about different ones, and there's kind of different categories of those. And people are upset about some of them for different reasons. And of course, a lot of people like them for different reasons. But I'm just one member of the communications committee. I'm not on the XCOM. I'm not speaking for LPNH. And then I think actually at least some of the frustration that's being directed towards me or towards LPNH is about things that I've said on my personal accounts, which is, in my opinion, a completely separate matter, right? Mises Caucus supporters of all people should kind of be on board with this idea that, we're not policing things that people are saying on their private pages. It'd be one thing if I'm a candidate. I'm not a candidate, right? So it's like we need to be, if LPNH is going to be getting in trouble, it needs to be about things that LPNH said, not things that I've said, right? And so we do need to keep those things kind of separate. But to answer your question as to how I feel about all this, so I feel really bad for Karen Ann. She's been like an absolute warrior, and seeing this happen to her, I mean, it seems like that's the scalp that they're trying to get, so that they walk away with something. And yeah. So I feel very bad about that. I feel bad, like there's a lot of people had to all of a sudden put a bunch of time in. They had crazy weeks. People aren't sleeping. People had to do a lot of fighting, are being weighed, and as engineering mindset. I don't like seeing resources go to waste, time being wasted, money being wasted. And so so that doesn't feel good either. But on the whole, as someone who thought like the direction that the LP had been going in was embarrassing, and I'm a committed libertarian. I'm like basically an ANCAP, although we could maybe quibble around the edges about some of that, but I'm a very committed libertarian. I'm on the board of the Free State Project, the CEO of a company, why the battle of the fight. Streaming live, an exclusive happened yesterday for me, so I don't go in that direction. But like, so I'm fighting for liberty on a number of fronts. I'm a very committed libertarian, and I think this is good for the libertarian movement. I think like LP National had been sort of taken over by what I would call woke neoliberal globalists, and they're not libertarians. They don't. Libertarianism is private property, bodily autonomy, voluntary association. Right? These are sort of the core atoms of libertarian philosophy, and I don't think that the people who are on the LNC endorse them. And so it's not this sort of grow the party at all costs. It's no, grow the party with libertarians. Right? Like we can't. It's we could be for basic income, and maybe we could get even more people to be involved. But we don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah, we could just become Republicans and Democrats and then just get votes that way. I mean, and I had this conversation last week with our the chair of the LPPA, Jen Moore, and we had a conversation you hear this all the time, people saying like, well, the party's here to win elections and get votes. I'm like, yeah, but at what cost? Like, you can't detach that. Like, it can't be victory at all costs, because like if you win but you're no longer libertarian, then like, what's the point? Like, what was the point of supporting it in the first place? Right.
And this gets into some sort of like deeper ideas about how social change, sort of happens, and how new ideas are, become sort of accepted. And, in my view, you can't begin like this sort of optimization of like, go from X% to any number that's higher than X. You can do this when you're at maybe 30 or 40%. When you're at 1%, you need to be attracting people who can understand the ideas, who can articulate the ideas, who can then bring other people into understanding the ideas, right? Because that's how society and change actually happens, right? So people need to be actually committed to it. They need to be understanding of it, and they need to have the kind of psychology where they're willing to go in and articulate ideas that are only supported by this minority of the population, right? And so, and that's sort of what's sort of implicit in the quote prags, which I don't know how they got that label, because I generally think being pragmatic is a good thing. But they sort of implicitly in their strategy are saying these aspects of libertarianism are embarrassing, and so let's just not talk about them. And it's like, well, then you're going to have people come in who aren't going to understand that those are very important aspects of libertarianism.
This is one thing that Dave Smith has talked about a lot. There seems to be a few things that I feel as libertarians we can all get behind, like ending wars, ending corporate welfare, and things of that nature. It doesn't seem to me that we should be embarrassed by that message. Now, I guess there are some things that people don't understand. We can get into those later, because they'll be relative to the tweets. But in the Mises Caucus, one of the things that I do with people is onboarding them, and new people coming in, and the biggest thing that they hear is where's the message within the last year with an absolute fail of lockdown messaging and being all mostly Ron Paul movement people. We came all into the party through strong, uncompromising messaging, just telling the truth, and that seems to be something that's getting lost here. That speaking our principles is not something we should hide behind. Instead, it's something that we should embrace and share, because it's the most beautiful political philosophy that's ever existed.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Although I do think, and I love Dave of the sort of quote big three or whatever, who might be the next candidate. Dave's my choice. I'm in his corner. But like, I do think there is there's a bit of a split inside of the Mises Caucus inside of this, where it's like it's almost its own form of pragmatism. Like, in my view, like, and I'm not saying we have to be leading with these things, but we need to be able to be talking about them. Like, I think that we should be able to talk about all aspects of libertarianism. If we're only also now talking about some of these aspects of libertarianism, but not others, and we're recruiting people in, those people need to understand the whole idea, right? Like if, and so like for, and I think, take the child labor tweet, right? I don't think there are many people who are sort of like committed libertarians who understand the philosophy who are going to say that like that's a business of the state. That's an issue between like parents and their children and this kind of thing about what age they want to work. I would have worked at 12. I don't think school is actually that educational. There are real policy positions here. You can talk about Brian Kaplan's work, on education, or there's a lot of evidence that school is not actually doing that much. And so, but that's actually, that topic that's not part of the Mises sort of quote platform, right? That's so I kind of went, from a Mises perspective, I maybe went quote off message, but I think that, and I'm not trying to have us beat the drum about that all the time, but I do think that that's something that we shouldn't be afraid to say. I mean, to me, I don't want to be afraid saying anything that's consistent with that core libertarian philosophy of private property, bodily autonomy, and voluntary association. And so, like, to me, it's like I'll argue any of it. I'll talk about any of it because I'm not ashamed of it. Whatever. And so maybe, and that's something I think Mises Caucus will have to kind of think about. And I'm a lowly guy here, so I'm not trying to say that one conclusion should be reached or another. But it's like, are we only talking about these things, or can we also talk about some of these issues that are still consistent with libertarian philosophy?
Well, you highlight some interesting topics there, and we had this conversation yesterday, like me and Michael and a lot of others. The Mises Caucus preaches decentralization, right? And that kind of comes to bear in our caucus in terms of what people do. Like, it's not a top-down caucus even. Like, yeah, Mike's the chair and the board and stuff kind of sets, and we have a platform that kind of sets the tone. But then when you come down to like the people doing the work in each individual state affiliate or each individual county affiliate, we're not micromanaging that. So people are free to do and say and kind of prioritize what they want, so to speak. I mean, if they go really far off reservation, then yeah, like we'll come and have a conversation with them. But yeah, it's the and then regarding the child labor stuff, I've been working since I was like 8 years old, if you want to get really technical. My family owns a transmission repair shop. And like I've literally I loved the idea of working there from the time I was a kid. And so like literally I was like 8, 9 years old, and summer vacation, I'd be coming in, cleaning, watching people working on cars, learning about it. So like it's funny, like, when people ask like, oh, how long have you been employed here? It's like, since I'm 20, 30 years, even though I'm only like 29 years old. So it's like I've literally always been there, always been working, going there after schools and stuff. And now my situation's unique because it was a family business, so like that was kind of like more allowable. But like for the most part, it's these child labor laws, even if like that's maybe not like the hill I'm going to die on as far as like the message I'm going to put out every day. Those laws are damaging in terms of like they are restricting people's ability to learn, to get new skills, and to become competitive in the market, and to be able to provide for themselves. So I do think it's a topic that warrants discussion for sure.
Yeah, and I think and look, those tweets. So there's two tweets in particular, basically the child labor one and the one related to sort of like wokeness and the Civil Rights Act and so on, where and we can talk about that one. But basically both of those, and that's one where we're saying repeal the Civil Rights Act, and disparate impact legislation, and affirmative action, these kinds of things. Again, basically straightforward from libertarian principles, but there's substantial policy positions here. Like a lot of wokeness is actually civil rights law, right? Like you can't, you can't, for example, IQ test to hire employees, and that's because of civil rights law.
Except with your police.
Yeah, right. So there's a real strategy here where we're saying things that we know are provocative, that we know are going to set off people who are going to use it to say, look at the libertarians, but then we're backing it up with real substantive policy positions. So in both cases, we're providing resources for people who might go, why are they saying that? And right now, libertarians are much more ignored than anything else. And so if we can put a message out and sort of utilize the people who already dislike us to amplify it. And that's boosting it. And then look, even if it's only 10% of people, even if it's only 5% of people who are going to actually look at it and get curious about it, those are the kinds of people that you want. And if you look at, and probably everyone listening to this was kind of at one point that kind of person who is curious enough to sort of pick up the ideas and say, hey, is there anything here? Even if they had heard that they were unpopular, right? I remember reading Milton Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom when I was like 19 or 20. And like, I was like, this Milton Friedman guy, man, a lot of people sure don't like him. What's he have to say? And I was like, this is great. This makes a lot of sense to me. Why don't people like this? And so I think that it's better that, like, even if people are going around saying that it's unpopular, that this is bad or whatever, curious people will pick it up and look at it, and they may be convinced by it when they actually look at it, right? And so if the alternative is to like not get hurt at all, right, we have to make it's I think it's better that some people be offended by us than that we not get hurt. One other comment I'll make here is that to some extent, libertarians are basically an extremely dominated minority. We have these sort of sincere beliefs, like, and I'll use lockdowns as an example, where like, it was really offensive to me. It's not offensive to most people, right? 70-80% of people were basically cool with it, right? And so we are like sort of like subjugated in a way that others aren't. We find what the government does genuinely more offensive and genuinely more harmful than other people's subjective experience. And so to some extent, like, libertarians do have their own liberation. We deserve to be able to live the way that we want to live, much the way that gay people deserve the right to live the way that they wanted to live in the past and weren't, maybe still aren't in some cases. So like, but it's like, if you sort of dominate, have gotten to live the way that they live, it's like by saying, no, this is us, we are, and we just to live the way we want to live, and we're not going to apologize for it. And I think that that's a way better message than trying to comport who you are to sort of please the status quo.
Well, you bring up a really good point, which is like the subject of like, what do we get offended by? And like, I know like so much over the past few weeks, people have just like, people highlight your tweets, whether it's the New Hampshire ones or the ones on your personal account, and they'll show them to me, or they'll be showing them just on public and be like, look at what he said. Isn't it outrageous? Isn't it offensive? And like, calling you all sorts of names. And I'm just like, even if I were, and even in some instances, both in the past few weeks and in the past, there have been times where you say things and I look at it and go, like, I wouldn't have said that. I think he went too far. But then it's like, people are reacting in ways that I'm just like, okay, like, can we have a little bit of perspective here? Like, bombs are being dropped on innocent people halfway across the world right now. People are living in cages near the border. People are we have the biggest prison population in the world, and most of it is for people doing nonviolent crimes. Like, there's so many things that I'm offended by that, like, when it comes to, like, someone like you who's trying to, like, engage in libertarian activism, and in doing so, you're trying to push on boundaries. You're trying to wake people up in different ways. It's like, even if I have disagreements at times with how you do that, it's like, I'm sorry, like, I don't have an infinite amount of outrage and offense and being offended to spend on these things. So it's like, and I don't understand some of the outrage that people have had in terms of, like, people that call themselves libertarians, especially, in terms of, like, even if they want to have a debate with you, to be like, hey, this type of messaging is not the best way to grow the movement or the party. Like, that's a separate debate. And I think that's a good one to have, a good ongoing conversation to have about how do we balance being edgy and trying to get people to pay attention to us with, like, not wanting to completely turn them off. And I think that, there's merit to both arguments. I came in a little bit more against your perspective until I heard you on some other podcasts explaining your point of view, and now I'm like, okay, like, this is not clear cut. It's not black and white. But regardless, even if I thought you were totally wrong, I just don't understand how people can look at these things and be more offended at that than, like, the things that we all oppose.
Well, there's kind of a logical battlefield going on here that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration. This is something that Bastiat talked about. The you know the what we call the wokeists now, they use these allogisms which are single line statements that are patently false, but they sound good. You know, all or the assumption that education is just a foregone conclusion, like education is good, actually an incorrect statement. And to combat that, this is what Bastiat talked about, was you have to get into this long explanation of actually know why this is incorrect, and you end up trying to battle these one line statements with a mile long explanation, and then you lose people. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because what Jeremy and tactics like this were doing is combating these one line allogisms with one lines of truth, and it may have rubbed people the wrong way because they didn't understand all the support that led up to that statement. And in the world of social media, where people are one line and they're out, I think that's where a lot of this confusion is getting taken in, because they're not looking into the philosophy afterwards. You see the line and child labor, which is a position of the party, I believe, not even a questionable one. And this ends up becoming such a controversial issue because of the I don't know if it's the inability, but the inefficiency of being able to back up that one line statement, I think, is where people are having an issue with. And if we can figure out how to get them to look a little deeper, I think we might be a little better off.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm not in any way on here saying like I'm batting 1,000. Like I'm open to the idea that mistakes may have been made. That everything's not being done perfectly, but there is like a real considered intent here, and I think there is a lot of value to at least some aspect of this approach. And to go back to the child labor one, right? So like, Gary clapped back at us. Gary, baked the cake Johnson, so he regularly espouses things that are clearly against the platform, right? We're not espousing things that are against the platform. Gary does, right? So he's the one who should be in trouble. Creates a Fox News article out of the TIFF. The Fox News article, if anything, like tries to make us look a little bad, though it's balanced again, because they give our side, they give our quotes of the take that we were given. And you look at the comments in that article, all of the top comments are on our side, all of them. And so, that was that one, I will go to the mat defending that one, quite frankly, because it got a bunch of press. It's reaching people who aren't seeing the ideas. And a lot of people, when they hear it, they go, yeah, actually, that does make sense. Actually, I do believe that starting vocational education earlier would be better than, having kids stay in high school longer, and so it's like, I think that one was like, an absolute win.
People being edgy with messaging does work. I mean, some people complain about even just saying taxation is theft,
right?
Because they go like, that's going to turn off the normies. That's what got me in, because I saw people sharing that and I was upset. I was like, how is taxation theft? I was like, maybe some of it's going too far and you can call it theft, but how is every single tax theft? And I was like angry, went into a debate with a bunch of libertarians, because I saw that, it got me riled up, and then 12 hours later I was a libertarian, because that's what brought me to talking to them. It's like, but if people had just said, hey, we want the tax rate to be lowered by 10%, I would have never been inspired to go and actually encounter libertarians. You know what I mean? So
because what they're doing is just messing with the dials of authoritarianism, and that's not what's going to bring people over.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Taxation, that's a great point. Taxation is theft is a line that most people, the vast majority of people, are going to say is ridiculous, is untrue. Like, oh, those ridiculous libertarians again, saying that taxation is theft. But I think that's absolutely, fine to say. And it's a provocative statement, maybe less so at this point because it's been sort of in the ether for so long. But it still is a provocative statement to a lot of people. You back it up. You say, this is why taxation is theft, because it violates these core principles that we have. And this is our philosophy. And this is why we believe these things.
Yeah. 100%. And
I love this point from Bill here.
Yeah. Even people, when I first saw the child labor tweet, I was like, like when you put it out there just that bluntly, I was like, I don't know if I would have done that. But then I saw the result of that, which was people actually coming and having the conversation and defending the principles. Like Todd Agopian went on this little like Twitter thread that he like really hammered the points down like perfectly. So I was like, yeah, like I can see where those kind of tweets are actually productive. The ones that I think are a bit more controversial that maybe we can get into would be like the ones that are like, you know, the politicians having brain tumors being good for freedom, or you know, sending people to Gitmo.
Before we get into that, and this is something that just as we were talking beforehand that I was actually glad to hear. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it went from before convention, what was going on, what happened at convention, and then what role you actually have in this, and how many people are involved, and what actually is going on? Because we've heard a lot of stuff over the week about people's conjectures of you know, who's involved, how this happened. But do you want to just give us a little background on how we got from you know, whatever, you know, very small
just real quick to Jacob's point, like and we'll come back to it. I agree with you. I actually am much more interested in doing the provocative but substantive policy ones than the ones that are shit posting, you know, send the governors to Gitmo style shit posting. So
I mean, it's funny. Don't get me wrong. I laughed at it, but
no, I think those are much more debatable than the substantive policy position ones. But hey, look, also we got Meghan McCain to read that tweet, so I don't feel that bad about it. But to tell the story of it. So basically, well, I'll give it from my personal side, because I can give it that way, you know, genuinely. And so, you know, I'm a Free Stater. I'm on the board of the Free State Project. I'm a committed Free Stater. I would have been a Libertarian Party member, a paid Libertarian Party member for, I guess, like 3 or 4 years. And I'd been in the party back and forth. You know, I voted Libertarian for president at least 3 times. I was even all the way back in college. I went to the Libertarian political club. I didn't stick around for that long, but like I was a Libertarian. I wasn't always super into the party, but I've been a Libertarian for a long time. And actually, the reason I became a dues-paying member back in 2017 was because Daryl Perry invited me to pay, and I was like, yeah, I support the Libertarian Party. Sure, why not? Although I think, you know, I'm a supporter of the Free State strategy more than anything else that we can win through concentration. So I was really frustrated though by the messaging, particularly the embracing of some of the woke philosophy stuff, because I think that's actually like legitimately a dangerous philosophy, right? I think that the sort of, and the wokeism actually is core to the split of what's going on. We can come back to that, but I was frustrated, so I did what I think is the right thing to do when you don't like what they're saying. I said, all right, you know, like I'm out. If this is the way that the campaign is going to run, I'm not going to be a member of the party. So I left, and then the Mises stuff started coming together. I had a lunch or dinner with what the head Mises organizer here. His name is Ben Richards. He was getting a bunch of people together. I said I thought, you know, I could get some people from the Free State side, because the Free Staters, like there's the LP and this is actually a big part of New Hampshire. This is a New Hampshire specific thing that probably a lot of people don't know. So a lot of the Libertarians in New Hampshire do run as Republicans or Democrats. Even we have Libertarians running as Democrats. We're just like, get elected any way possible. I mean, there are multiple lifetime Libertarian Party members that are elected as Republicans here. We have literal anarcho-capitalists in office who got elected as Republicans. And so a lot of these Libertarians who are very committed, serious Libertarians, left the LP because they were running as Republicans as they were winning. And so what was left in LP&H was basically that shell of the like extremely woke, not particularly libertarian socialist, you know, types. And that was all that was left in the party. And so so basically the in-state Mises Caucus, who had founded independently through Dave Smith and others, plus Free Staters who were frustrated with LP&H, you know, kind of using the word libertarian in these ways that they didn't like, they kind of came together. So there were LP&H was like around 60 people last summer. Going into convention, Mises had driven the numbers up to around 100. Those were efforts led more by Ben than anyone else, although I did get some from the Free State side. And we came into convention. Most out of convention, XCOM was half Mises, half non-Mises, with some Mises sympathetic. The chair, Gilletta, was was supposed to be an olive branch to the Nick Sarwark, sort of side. Nick, of course, got noted. And then we came out of convention. There started to be some tensions pretty quickly where Gilletta was frustrated by things that were happening, and then she'd get overruled by the rest of the XCOM, right? So she was starting to feel kind of powerless, and she was going to do the right thing and resign. And then some unnamed person, gave her the idea to pull all of these shenanigans, and now we're kind of where we are now. And I will say, so today we have 165 members. So we have more than doubled the size of LPNH in under a year. And I don't think that growth is going to let up. So I think empirically, in terms of getting the membership up here in the state, this strategy is absolutely working. I probably left some important details out of that story, but that's sort of the high level.
Well, how many people are there really in the the social media committee there in New Hampshire?
The committee itself, I think, is 4 or 5 people. In terms of the tweets, were basically mostly me and this guy Eric Sawyer, who you should also follow. He's a great guy. And then Bill Barger has done a lot of any of the graphics or Photoshops have mostly been done by Bill Barger.
Yeah, and I think it's the people getting upset over the idea of liberty Republicans and all that. I'm just have you ever heard of Ron frickin' Paul?
Yeah.
Just come on. I mean, I'm vested in the Libertarian Party for sure, and that's because I think I want the Libertarian Party to be libertarian. You know what I mean? That's something that the Mises Caucus talks about. I want it to not be this, I always say, libertarianism is not Republicans who smoke weed or Democrats who like guns, okay? Libertarianism is a philosophy, and if you're going to have a political party that uses that name, it needs to represent the philosophy.
Yeah.
You can say it needs to do it pragmatically, and I'm fine with that, but it still needs to represent it correctly. It can't obfuscate it and make it look like something completely different. And but to that point, as far as if we're talking about what's the most effective way to engage the culture or change legislation, I have no problem if libertarians in a particular state like New Hampshire say, you know what, in my county or in this state, in this situation, I can actually win and make a difference if I run as a Republican than versus if I try doing it as a libertarian. I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, I think that I'm skeptical of it, but I don't think that it's unreasonable to at least have that idea and to hash it out. I think it's a case by case situation. You know what I mean? And I think Ron Paul showed that you can, not really through policy, but you can bring people to the movement by using, any platform that you can get, even if it's a Republican platform. And I think that that's part of the division here is that I think a lot of us here in these, in the Mises circles of the Libertarian Party and movement, we care more about growing the movement, and then consequentially, the party should grow from the movement growing. And I think sometimes a lot of the other, not everybody, I don't want to just too generalize here, but I think a lot of people care more about getting more votes, getting more people elected. And I'm okay with more votes and getting more people elected if that's a natural consequence of more libertarians.
Exactly.
What I mean?
Precisely. By the way, Republicans who smoke weed are called Democrats, not libertarians. The Libertarian Party should serve the small L libertarian movement, right? It's exactly what you said. It's about getting more libertarians. It's about getting more people to understand libertarian ideas. This notion that if you're a member of the party, you have to serve the party at all costs. It's no, I serve libertarianism, right? That's right. What I'm serving.
This stuff really pisses me off. It's the whole idea behind libertarianism is standing on principle and not collectivism and tribalism. And it's I love the Libertarian Party and concept, but my loyalty is not to a party. Yeah. I'm not gonna vote L no matter what.
Preach. Preach.
You know what I mean? Like that's not what libertarianism is about. And I'm just tired of people who are like you're like they put the party first. It's like no,
Yes.
that's not like if you're putting the party first, then you're just as much like you're really not that much different than Republicans and Democrats. You know what I mean?
Haven't we
Like I'm
learned over
sorry.
the last haven't we learned over the last 200 years that if you hand over your authority, your autonomy for yourself, it inevitably gets used against you. If you hand over your voice to a group, the group inevitably becomes about its self-perpetuation rather than its constituency. Look at government, look at labor unions, look at any group, look at the political parties. I'm sure that if the Libertarian Party has success, eventually it'll go down the road of the two main parties. You know, and it's right now a tool for this thing. I think that's something that's lost on a lot of people.
Yeah. In the comments, someone from our team is saying that we've got more than 20 people to join just in the last couple of days, and so there definitely are a lot of people who are supporting this.
Yeah, for sure. One comment I wanted to highlight here, and this is from someone in our in NPA, one of the active members of the Mises Caucus asked this question, and I'm curious too. And I mean, I remember like I'm active on the Clubhouse app, and like when this stuff first started breaking, and there was people getting upset, they were like, freaking out, and I was like, okay, like, is it helpful to go on Twitter and complain and bitch and throw personal attacks out at people and affiliates because you don't like what they're doing? Or like has anyone considered actually just like let's go talk to them, like let's just go like have a reach out and talk? And I'm curious if anyone like Mark, I'm curious if anyone actually did that.
No, they didn't. That's the craziest part. So like Joe Bishop Henchman, who formed all of these incredibly strong opinions, and also it shows how much the wokes reach to these slurs like bigot, because there's nothing that we said count that you're bigoted. Nothing, right? What it actually is, my mouth talks. Got the status in life is it comes from being these party officials, right? And the same psychological reasons, and one of the dictates of wokeism is basically, it's not enough to be not woke. You must be woke. Merely not loudly cheering for the ideas is to be. So like the evidence for homophobia is basically we talking about Pride Month enough. It's not we said remotely homophobic, like, and so you use these words, oh, they're homophobic, they're bigoted, and that's just, we're not actively woke. That's right. There's not a single message that remotely construed as endorsing bigotry or endorsing, but what it is loudly endorsing values, and that's that. And so, I'm not. So I think wokeism is wrong. I don't care if you want to in values, but you have to.
Hey, Jeremy, your connection is breaking up. You're on a really good point here.
Yeah, I can tell what you're saying, Jeremy,
it.
but yeah, you're cutting in and out. But let me try to summarize it. I think, and when you come back, your signal comes back good. You can correct me if I said anything incorrect. But I think what you're getting at here, and I agree, is that there's this problem where there's a lot of people in the libertarian movement and party who come from this more, and I don't know a good label to use other than woke, or I mean, some people use the cultural Marxist label or whatever, and people on that side, they refuse to be labeled or to come up with their own label. So if they can't give me a better label to use, I'm just going to use those, like the cultural Marxist types, the woke types, like the ones who basically say it's not enough to just not be racist, you must be actively anti-racist, and it's you're transphobic or bigoted or homophobic if you don't exactly bow down to Jeremy's back, I think, but if you don't exactly bow down to and celebrate in the same way that I do all these different lifestyles, like it's not enough to say I'm okay with you living your life exactly how you want to do it. It's not okay to even say like I don't see a personal problem with those things. It's like you have to engage in these word games, in these weird rituals, in these celebrations, in these identity politics games, and if you don't, then you must be an awful person. And I'm getting really sick and tired of the people who push that stuff.
Well, that was such a conspicuous thing on the LP&C meeting 2 nights ago, where there was every every other person gave the word vomit, I object, or whatever, to but it just got so redundant and seemingly unnecessary that you can it's a manifestation of exactly the thing that you're talking about. But
yeah, you got it pretty good. I apologize for the connection issues. I feel real bad about that. I'll have to do a bit. I need to improve my home setup here. I normally do these from my office.
I'd like to go back for a second, and it's a comment that you had put up, but this is something that as somebody who actively recruits for Mises, this is something that I deal with all the time. And Joshua Gallison said the olive branch stuff needs to stop. And we can see here it leaves your enemies where they can cause problems. Yeah. So there is something very deep to this, because as everybody knows, the Mises Caucus gets brought up all the time as the divisive side and the controversial side. But this is a tactic that state Mises Caucus across the country have used in their states, of sending these olive branches saying, hey, we want to work with people, we'll work with anybody. And now it's continuously coming back to bite us in the ass. And I think it's a great demonstration of where the controversy and the divisiveness is really coming from.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because it's clear that there are some of these people with this mentality that are they're snakes. Okay, they have no principles, and they're going to do whatever it takes. And I would put Joe Bishop Henchman in this category. Clearly, some members of the LNC are in this category. Gilletta was in this category, and some of them are going to be in this category. I don't think that it's all of them. So, I don't think that we want to say that, if you're, that we refuse to work with any of them. And it is clear that a lot of this takeover stuff is a straight projection, because we're the ones following the rules, and they're the ones, willing to break or bend them. The thing is, the times where the cooperation does work, it's not going to be a story. You're not going to know about it. And so I'm sure there is some affiliate out there where they're actually working together fine. And those affiliates, maybe they should speak up and tell their story, because the times when these kinds of people do these kinds of things, that's when it's going to become a bunch of drama and everyone's going to hear about it. So you're going to hear about it not working, but you're not going to really hear about it working. And so that's not me saying that it is working. I'm just saying that's, if that's what you're going to experience. And so you have a selection effect in the stories that you're hearing. And so that is just worth considering. But I agree that it's clear that you certainly can't unilaterally trust them, because this has happened too many times.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this comment, because this is so much what's going on social media right now. It's just it's not enough to be it's I don't know. And this is part of this woke mentality too, where it's just you either have to completely condemn a person or a group entirely if they do one thing that people deem as unacceptable, or you 100% endorse, agree with, and are in the same camp with everything they do and say forever and all time.
Yes,
it's I don't get that. It's such an unnuanced, childish, juvenile way to view the world, to view human relationships, to view activism. It's ridiculous. It's you can have disagreements with people. I could even look at some of the comments you've made over the past few days and go, that was, maybe a bit off color. Maybe that was rude, or and whatever. Be but I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think you're a bigot. I don't think you're all the other names that people are calling you, just because at times people say things that I might find personally to be oh, he's just being a little bit too hostile or aggressive in that situation. And even then, it's that's just a difference of, I don't get too much into the back and forth on social media where people come at me, I don't come back twice as hard. That's just me. If other people do that, it's just whatever. If I'm asked to comment on it, or I'm seeing it happen live in front of me, I might say something. But other than that, I'm sorry, I'm not going to lose sleep or be distracted from the bigger picture and things going on because a person who is a good libertarian and does good things one time said something that was rude or mean. It's come on. It's stupid.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what it is, right? It's so people want to say, because I've said some things on my personal page, and I'm willing, and on my personal page, one, I mean, I do troll sometimes. So some of the things I said that people don't like, I literally said that because I knew it would piss those people off, right? And because like I think if I say something to a libsoc and that about libertarianism that libsocs really dislike about libertarianism, and it makes them dislike libertarianism, that's a good thing. I want that outcome. So I'm saying something that's provocative to them that they will say, they will talk shit on, and it'll make them dislike libertarians. Exactly what I want, right? I am also, I can be a bit of a troll. I can be provocative. I'm also willing to entertain just about any idea, which means I'm willing to engage with things that people might find taboo. I'm willing to discuss things logically and not emotionally, which is challenging for a lot of people. But it's like, okay, don't come into my space then, right? Like I want to interact in these ways with other people that think like me. I'm not demanding that, you know, this is not me speaking on behalf of the party. And it is entirely this woke kind of idea that like an institution is responsible for everything that any member of that institution says at any time in any context that they say, and it's just ludicrous.
And it's stupid. And that's not how the Mises Caucus is run by any stretch. Like we are very decentralized in how we do things, like I said earlier. And it's like if there's individual members of the Mises Caucus who go like, I don't like Jeremy Kauffman, I'm not going to work with him. We go, that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead. You don't have to. If there's people that go, I like Jeremy Kauffman and I want to work with him, it's like, go ahead. That's your prerogative. Like,
as opposed to the very top-down type of thing.
Isn't that our thing?
Yeah. As opposed to the very top-down type of leadership that we're seeing right now from the LNC, with the attempts to disaffiliate and what they're doing to Karen Ann Harlos. I mean,
and same, and especially for people in Mises Caucus, like. I really am happy to talk to you. As you can tell from this, video, like there are reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing. It is like I'm a thoughtful person, and as I said, I'm going to make mistakes, right? I'm trying to figure some things out here, and so I'm happy to have a conversation about it. I'm not demanding everything be like like edgelordy provocative stuff and so on. So please reach out and talk to me.
Well, let's talk about one of the tweets that may, in people's minds, have gotten the closest to what they claim as bigotry, which I think is an absurd claim if you actually think about the tweet. But it was that businesses are allowed to discriminate, no matter how abhorrent that may be. This is a part of the Libertarian Party platform.
Yeah,
this isn't even a controversial thing. But do you want to comment on that?
This is why, and some Mises, in my opinion, may go too far the other way. Like private property, bodily autonomy, and voluntary association means that you can voluntarily associate into an ethno community if that's your preference, and it also means that parents and their children, when they consent, can take transition hormones, and it's not your business either. Like that's the thing is people are going to have, there's a wide spectrum of social values that people are going to have, and we need to be able to interact peacefully with people who do not share our social values, and that's part of the beauty of this core of these core axioms, because it allows people to form clusters and form communities. Those communities may have values that are different than ours, right? And so we can't say that everyone has to have our social values. We have to say that people with different values are able to cluster and form communities where they share those things. And I want to live in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society. I run a company where I literally employ people of around the world, every continent but Antarctica, all different types of people and cultures. And so it's like,
why are you racist against Antarcticans?
Anyone from Antarctica out there is interested in tech jobs, you can contact me. So it's that, and it keeps coming back to this core issue, which is that for a lot of these people, not all of them, but for a lot of these people with these woke beliefs, it's you have to endorse them, and if you don't endorse them, then you're a bigot, and it's ridiculous.
Well, and for people that don't know, like there is a strong libertarian argument for why things like the Civil Rights Act are unlibertarian. I mean, because the problem isn't like, I understand why people like that, like the act, is because like historically it was a stand against racism and stuff, and it's like I get that, but the problem is when you give the government the power to tell private businesses and private entities that they have to do something, that they or what they can and can't do, you've ceded ground that is going to be used to justify more authoritarian control over private entities down the road. And so that's the problem. And I'm again, this is one of those things like child labor where it's like, is that something that like me as a Mises Caucus member or me as an individual libertarian, like are those the issues that I'm going to go out there and maybe highlight every single day? Probably not, but they do need to, occasionally I think it's reasonable to bring these things up into public discourse to push against that Overton window, which is, it's pushing against the idea of centralization, of central planning, of the idea that the solution to life isn't freedom of association. The solution to life is everybody has to have the same social values, or they must be like condemned and or I don't know, like potentially even worse. I don't know. Like who knows how far that could go. We've seen authoritarian regimes throughout history that, lock people up, put them in internment camps for all sorts of reasons. I don't think it's completely ridiculous to imagine that thought crimes, you know what I mean, couldn't potentially be a thing that happens down the road. I'm not saying we're there now, but it's not impossible to imagine a scenario where something like that happens, where somebody says a racist thing and they get locked up in jail or have to pay, incredible fines that destroy their lives.
So the child labor one, that was just a one of. We're not trying to beat that drum all the time. I think the woke civil rights stuff, I actually would like to see the Mises Caucus look at these issues and consider making it a bigger part of their platform and something that they talk about, because right now there's actually not there's not a party where it's really actually safe to be anti-woke, right? Even in the Republican Party, right? Like, I mean, look at, and I'm not saying that libertarians, well, I don't know what a good issue would be, but like Republicans are basically Democrats, but 20 years behind them, right? Like they tend to adopt the same values. Republicans aren't going to be against the Civil Rights Act, but the Civil Rights Act, seriously, so Google, these two articles are really worth looking at. One is Woke Institutions is Just Civil Rights Law. And you just Google that title. It's a Substack article by a guy named Richard Hanania. And also Deregulate Discrimination by Brian Kaplan. These articles have really substantive policy about a lot of the reasons that this stuff has happened. The woke capturing of institutions, it is supported by the federal government, and these policies enable it to happen. That do not see more corporations that are on the other side of wokeness, right? And that is because of the law. It is because of the government, and so there are really important policy positions here that people ought to understand for those curious about it.
Well, isn't that really Murray Rothbard's entire principle in Anatomy of the State, and where he really diverged from Milton Friedman was that the free market is always better and more effective at bringing about actual desired results than the state could ever be.
Yeah. Milton Friedman's son, David Friedman, who I'm a big fan of, makes. And by the way, David Friedman also has a great quote where he calls his father a socialist because he believed in the federal. He's trolling his dad. They obviously got along great, but it's really funny. But anyway, David Friedman has this great point that like any of these changes that are happening. Like these, when you're enforcing social values through the state, it means that it's happening through democracy, which means the majority of the people already held the social value, right? So the point at which you're passing a law that says, you can't discriminate on this axis, that was like basically already on the way out the door. The majority of the people already thought that was wrong. The social trend, you can't pass the law to protect homosexuals or to protect African Americans when only 10% of people care, because there's not enough people to care about it, right? So when laws are passing, that's a lagging indicator of social trends. It's not a leading one. The law doesn't pass and then people change their social values. People change their social values and then they pass a law.
Yeah, that's true. And to me, it really exposes libertarians who don't trust the free market. It's like, if you say I'm a free market libertarian, but we need the government to stop people from discriminating against X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, then you don't actually believe in free markets. Like, and that's
Yep.
fine. Just own up to it.
Yeah.
Just be honest. Well, we're
Right.
probably
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
close to the.
Abolish the police, except for the police that go around and make sure every business has hired people of precisely the right number of each skin color and gender orientation. You know, it's like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we're getting close to an hour here. Was there anything you wanted to touch on, Jeremy or Rob? Things you wanted to talk about or discuss here at the end, or?
If there's no more questions, I'll hit on a couple of points. One is, if you're a libertarian, please come check out New Hampshire and the Free State Project. It's an incredible strategy that's like actually working to achieve libertarianism. The other, please support LPNH. You can be a member from out of state. If you like what we're doing, consider supporting us. Consider supporting us as well. Keep fighting for Karen Ann. I mean, she's going to win. Even if she loses, by the way, she's going to win, because Mises is going to win and she's going to be a fucking hero. Like, so if they martyr, if she gets kicked out, she will be a martyr. She will rise from the dead and she will be more powerful than ever before. Not
strike me down, I will become more powerful.
Yes, that is what's going to happen. Are you kidding? Yes, she will have more power in this movement than she ever had.
Yeah.
If they end up striking her down, actually, not immediately, but in 6 months or a year.
I tell you, the more of the stuff that they do, the more they're just driving people in towards this.
Yeah. But follow LPNH on Twitter, and you can also follow me on Twitter. It's just my full name.
Cool.
Very good.
Yeah, everyone check out the Free State Project. Check out what's going on. Keep watching these events as they unfold. I'm a big fan of Karen Ann. I'm glad that she was brave enough to put herself on the spot. I mean, she really to watch someone to the point of all the public attacks that she's taken, all the public criticism. I mean, she got up for justice and for exposing corruption, and has really been like the person that people have, other than the Mises Caucus broadly, she's the individual that's gotten the blunt of the blowback for that. So I really, I really want to express my appreciation for everything she's done. And everyone just keep paying attention. That's all I have. Anything you want to end out on, Rob?
No, Jeremy, thank you for coming. I appreciate you. You cleared up and made everything a lot more, easy for me to understand what's going on here, because we've heard so much shit in the last week that I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, and thanks a lot for having me on, guys. And what I'll say to anyone, if there's something I didn't talk about, I am really happy to talk about anything that I've done or that LPNH has done, and let's just have that dialogue before we go, attacking each other publicly. I think that's a healthy thing to be aiming for.
Well said.
For sure.
That's a good one to end on.
Yep. Thanks for coming again, Jeremy. Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. And like always, go out there and take human action. Bye.
Thanks, guys.